everyone. I am just thrilled. I'm really excited to be here and to have you all here with us. So poetry is bringing us together. Um, and okay, yeah, Hiram, why don't you introduce me? I think, uh, do you think I covered everything? Do you have any more questions that?
I think you did a beautiful job of welcoming folks, Phyllis. And I just simply want to say before I even introduce Phyllis that I am just so grateful to her for the whole idea of this poets in conversation. So often we get together to read to each other, but we sometimes don't have a chance to talk with each other. And so the whole concept, I think, here is really cool. And I'm grateful to her for being invited to work with her on this first inaugural launch Poets in Conversation. I'm very honored. I know she has some wonderful other future Poets in Conversation sessions lined up, one with Sandy Onving and others. So I'm sure she'll say something about that a little bit later on. But let's go ahead and begin to get started here by introducing Phyllis. I think Phyllis is known to many of us, but nonetheless, let's do the introduction so that we're all very familiar with her amazing background. She works as a psychotherapist specializing in trauma, and as a certified poetry therapist, this work has informed her poetry. She weaves her own traumas into her poems as well. Her book, The Full Moon Herald, is a poetic newspaper filled with real world and personal news. She's been widely published in journals and anthologies. She's won finalist prizes, and she's received several pushcarts. She sees writing as a dialogue between the author and the reader, an intimate relationship building process that fosters healing on many levels. We'll hear some of that and feel some of that healing in her work this evening, I'm sure, today, I'm sure. Writing about the daily news is her way of taking action to counter feelings of being overwhelmed and of loss. So with that, Phyllis, I'll turn the mic back over to you.
Well, thank you. I've got a little bit of a space problem here, so if you notice me crunching, that's what's happening. So the first poem I'm going to read is a love poem for Valentine's Day. It's kind of it's actually a poem for somebody who died in 2017, Greg Kimura, who had a writing group called Jumpstart that met at 9:00 in the morning on Saturday. And I really hated getting up that early, but he actually rescued me from writer's block and got me started. That group got me started writing again. So, yeah, he died of a brain tumor, and one of the things that he said to me that prompted writing this poem is I always would find readers and things going on at Stanford to go to. There are lots of amazing poetry readings at Stanford. And then I tell him that I went, and he'd say to me, "Oh God, I can't believe I missed that." So then he told me, you have to tell me what's going on. And no matter what, please let me know and I'll come to the reading. So this is what I wrote for him after he died. Just one more thing. Sherman Alexie is the other person that I love in this poem. And in my book is another poem about Sherman when I no longer love him anymore because of the Me Too movement. So I just thought I would say that. Sherman Alexie comes to Stanford for Greg Kimura, 1956 through 2017. You would come to this, I know, ready to receive the news and weather from him, part-time Indian, full-time writer, husband, father. The way he would make you laugh with the twist of his edge his "you liberal white people" jabs, the Indian jokes, the accents, how he gets all the tribal Stanford students to stand up so he can tell them how proud he is of them. He glows down from the stage. Maybe it would help you forgive yourself to know that he swears too, or maybe it would offend you, I'm not sure. He says stories are the thing for us humans, and you know that too. In a poem, he says, I always knew grief was a storyteller. I feel you in the hall with us. You're a tree with birds singing in your branches. You're with us when we go up to have our book signed and tell him we love him. Kind of trite, but the truth. You'd want to know that he says he edits his poetry a lot. Even him, damn it. Oh, sorry, pretend you didn't hear that. And sorry you missed him, Greg. You would have soaked him in. Here's your story. You are with the autumn leaves, drifted from your tree now, piled up, then spread into the world by winds. When you left, you were almost air already, but still shining, like always. So, thank you. So, here's another love poem. This is totally different. It's a new poem, different kind of love poem. It's for a species that's dying, and also about the grief that around that for me, and maybe for many of you as well. And it's in response to the news, but I think it's also more than that. And it's called To Know a Monarch. To know it only as a photograph, a memory. Never to witness again a community of millions clustered on eucalyptus branches now empty. These fragile slivers of stained glass no longer clinging to winter respites. What is a world that would allow this extravagant pollinator to die off, this migrational miracle? Rumi says, you were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? I want a humanity that weeps copiously for this animal who starts off in a crawl, shows us how to fly. I want processions, dirges everywhere, want to howl over milkweed, bereft without purpose. So much loss. I want to rend my garments, burn kaleidoscopes of butterflies into my skin. What good would that do? Or I could slice open the sky so their ghosts torrent down. What do I know of softness? My origins in an ice house, in a tradition of cruelty, of aberration, torn appendages. Where are the wings for this? Where the flashes of orange slipped through our fingers? Thank you. So if you thought that was rough, now I'm going to read about the Holocaust. And this is a poem in my book that I haven't read actually to anyone out loud or in a reading yet. So I thought I'd take a risk to do it today. And one of the things that came out of writing these news poems and putting them into a book is that I realized how much I've been impacted by the Holocaust personally on a very deep level that I didn't know. So it's called, I have to find the page. It's called Prepare to Be Wrong About Everything. So it's a a little difficult, might make you feel uncomfortable. And I hope, I wonder if perhaps we'll be talking about this one more, if you like, or any of the other ones as well. Prepare to be wrong about everything, like the Nazis were wrong about the Jews. Last night, I went to a concert, Violins of Hope. The restored instruments had made it out of the camps, were played by fine musicians. A mezzo-soprano sang a specially composed song cycle about the violins, their players. How the Nazis liked good music, found the acoustics worked best in the death shower rooms. Imagine a prisoner playing his violin in that blank, black place. I was wrong not to want to go to the concert because it moved me, was sad, of course, but also compelling. The violins and even a cello escaped from the camps, their owners probably gone by the time liberation came. Survivors went back in and freed the instruments. That took courage, going back to the scene of bleakest black. Later, a man in Israel decided to find those violins, restore them, found human ashes inside one, served as a reminder for never again. But even that feels wrong just now. And it's wrong to avoid trauma because it will find you wound up tight like strings over a bridge into a peg box, down to a tailpiece. I was prepared to be overcome, but the notes tried to save me from the dark. Appearances are deceiving. The music lives on, and Judaism lives on, although I don't like religion anymore. I think it's wrong to persecute anyone, but I do it too, especially to myself, which is really wrong. This damage, it plays and plays. Thank you. I'm just letting a few people in. Um, um, so here's just on a totally different note, another poem for a friend of mine. It's too disparate. It seems like there's two parts. They may seem rather disparate to you, but they fit together based upon the weather and what it's like to have a blustery heart valve in your chest that needs to be replaced. And actually, the person who, so the friend of mine who had the surgery is doing extremely well. The surgery was quite successful. It's called Forecast. 1, January now, and finally the rain. Finally the end to smog-filled air. The finality of dark days, short exclamations of grief. Storms headed east, spreading the flame of weather over the land. How the earth gets covered with it, as if the sky knows our troubles down here, takes a stand in extremes. Keeps the sign language coming. The believers, the unbelievers see the signs they want to see. But everyone notices ruin, and anyone in the path of a conflagration knows terror. And too much cold, together with too much warmth, spells out the end of permafrost. The garden burnt out, then flooded after the rain. The city underwater, buildings filled with fish, divers searching for artifacts. 2. We wait to hear about your prognosis, the electrocardiogram, the MRI. It's winter, rain again, and wind, blustery as the valve gusting in your chest. Your sternum cracked. They'll go in there for the leaking valve. You're preparing for it now that you've realized the science of it. The risk for incident, all that needs doing, filling out the endless forms, research, replacements for you at work. In the heat of it, the going under, undergoing of it. In you, it's all heart now. Life organized around befores and afters. You wait at the hospital entrance, dignified, terrified, ready. Thank you. And okay, the last one is over here. It's a new one, and it's for the guy right next to me in this Hollywood Square, sitting right next to me. So one of the joys of I shouldn't say the joys of the pandemic, but I don't know how else to say it. Silver lining. I think that's what you said, Hiram. Is the making of new friends over Zoom, people that that we wouldn't have met otherwise. And so when Hiram's birthday was coming around very recently, he wrote to his friends and said, "Please send me a poem for my birthday." And I just thought that was the most beautiful idea. So I went at it, and I wrote this poem for him. And I'll end with this. And the thing I want to tell you, there's a secret, but I'm going to let you in on it. And the secret is that every image in this poem is stolen from one of Hiram's poems, or many of Hiram's poems, actually. Birthday for Hiram. Please send a poem, you said, to help me celebrate. My best yellow pencil poises. I imagine your inbox swelling, your mail slot piled with pages, handwritten, typed. You in Maryland and me all the way in California. We haven't had enough rain here, and the days flutter by the way straw scatters in the wind. Could it scatter all the way east to arrive at your doorstep with my birthday wish? Even though we've never met, I grow fonder of you, as if enlightened stars become eyes, glance down on the birthday you I keep getting to know, and the me I want to know more of. And just say, friend, if you think you're a chewed pencil, then I must be a pencil in need of sharpening. Or maybe we're both good enough pencils, born on days worth celebrating. See us as we wave our wooden sticks on paper, hold our leads up to the sky, and watch the words kick up a chorus. And here we are, kicking up a chorus. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to introduce Hiram, yeah? Yeah. Do you want to say anything about that last poem before I do? Or
Other than I love it, of course, and it was such a wonderful one to receive for a birthday gift, and I appreciate, Phyllis, you writing it and sharing it. Yes, indeed.
the pleasure is mine. Okay, well, so what can I say about Hiram Larew? His poems of surprise have appeared widely, most recently in Poetry South, Contemporary American Voices, and Best Poetry Online. His fourth collection, Undone, was published in 2019 by FootHills Publishing. Awards include the Louisiana Literature Poetry Prize and the Washington Review Poetry Citation, along with 4 pushcart nominations and grants from state and local arts organizations. His Poetry X Hunger initiative is bringing poets from around the world to the anti-hunger cause. And the Voices of Woodlawn, which you cannot miss, is a poetic homage to America's slavery past, which he launched in collaboration with 3 African American poet friends. It has been presented online to hundreds of viewers. There you go, Hiram.
Great. Thank you so much, Phyllis. And I posted in the chat room a call for work about if you have a poem or poems about hunger that you would like to submit for possible posting on the Poetry X Hunger website, please send them in. Please, the email address is there. We have now about 250 poems by poets from all over the world, near and far. And those poems are being used by anti-hunger groups to speak back to hunger. And then here's a posting. I hope they doesn't mesh or mess up. Well, I thought I had it here. Let's see. Maybe not. I'll post something in the chat room also about Voices of Woodlawn, the upcoming March 25th presentation, which will be hosted by Woodlawn, which is the historic plantation that we are writing about. The staff there at Woodlawn will be hosting the next one. So I'll post that one. I just have a second here. But first, let me thank Phyllis again for creating this space for us. It's terrific to be with everyone and really appreciate folks coming in from near and far. Kind of like Phyllis, I have a couple of love poems, which actually the first one is a love poem that I'd like to share with you. It's a love poem to a meadow. It's titled Life with a Candle. I want to marry this field truly and simply, with its wings curving the corners and its smoothness stunning my knees. All of my heart is here, far around me, and there's humming and leaning, even this trifling breeze. I want this field for my living, to vow to its edges that nothing comes true without greening. Nothing seems as bold as my longings except sloping. Nothing wakes on my shoulder but such rustling. I hope the strangest hopes in this field ever bending. From here, I know that this much of my all is clear. Before there were hills or even eyes to up over, there was a distance beyond us, a long, far away that can never come near. There was wishing. I want to carry this field in my arms by its being to a maybe that's certain. So our future can flicker on grasses and our children will wave from the clouds. And the next poem is kind of a look back in wonder. Johnny Chapman, aka Johnny Appleseed, lived from 1774 to the mid 1800s, about 1845. He has, as you know, attained near fable status as a planter of apple seeds over much of the northern US in the early 1800s. This piece was published not too long ago in the West Trade review. It's titled Losing Birthdays. One of my grandmothers grew deep red geraniums on her front porch for everyone strolling by in summer to admire. My other grandmother trained a rose bush of palest pinks and heavenly scent up over her back door. I was lost. And now there is how this field of sunrise forgets such birthdays. While blackbirds pick and ticks climb up, what good am I at taking such things inside, these deepest loves and smallest sounds? And I'm told that wherever he went, my imaginary uncle caused people to halfway grin. He was strange, so they say, but people loved him anyway for his dreamy ways. He seemed just like Johnny Appleseed, who I still believe dropped barefoot seeds on every spot that could be found, poor or steep, from now to then. And the next piece is read with loving respect in another voice. It's titled Smart Dumb. She was born inside out, the size of a heavy orange. And the story goes that she was wobbly from the very start. Even as a little girl, she was so smart and so damn dumb together. That's the way sometimes. Well, wouldn't you know it? Dead solved the problem. The full story isn't important, but what is that at about 19 or so, she fell jaw drop in love with someone who just wouldn't, couldn't, and didn't. Someone like too close to a fire. Yes, with those kind of eyes. And the thing was, there was no warning her at all. Not any. The rumors were rich enough to live on. But here's the thing, really. She ended up like a tree toppled over with roots up in the air. Hers was a big sideways life that just never really got started. And of course, she's gone now, but wholly famous. That's what starting out with too many wants will do in an all or nothing sort of way. So, the lingering question is this: is it truly best to leave nature alone or to invite it in for a chat over dinner? And the next to last piece is kind of a what I call a giddy gasp of amazement from a porch that looks out onto a field. It's titled In Waiting When I speak twig above me, the sounds are unimaginable. Each swollen bud laces its shoes, and those earwigs, their pinches, squeak out to my growing gold days. They grab my damp hearts in waiting. And when I see such tremendous shake salting importance on bird tails, or feel the will that won't, that matters, it's then from roofs atop me that sudden notions wing me towards how to live. When I turn into twigs now, my sap dives deeper, and the claps clap louder up in those winking, drip diamond, wisely eaves. The last piece is a little bit older. It's all about the power of advice. It's titled, Don't Tell Anyone. The hardest thing to do is keep or stay. When most of what we do sneaks out, away, or turns cousinish on us. Largely put, ours isn't ours ever. It couldn't be. We need to learn to haven't, to pine for never, to unlove love, to trust the weather. Thank you so much, Phyllis. I'll turn it back over to you.
Wow. Well, thank you, Hiram. That was beautiful. Yeah, I like this comment. Powerfully precise poems of great imagery and construction. That's from Brenda. Thank you. So I don't know if anybody put a question into the chat. I see a lot of comments, which we really appreciate.
I think there was Sandy had a question about while you were reading, Phyllis. We probably have to scroll way back up. Let me see if I can find it here. Hold on just one second.
Or should we unmute everybody at this point?
It's fine.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
This is from Sandy Onfang.
Okay. Yeah.
She says, I would like to ask Phyllis about her work as a poetry therapist. What is the work like? How does she do it?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you, Sandy. And the first thing that comes to my mind is I see my poetry therapy mentor sitting in her room in a little square just down below me. So why don't let's unmute everyone, yeah? And then after I answer this question, we can talk a little bit, and other questions are quite welcome. So the question is about what is the work of a poetry therapist? And I can speak a little bit to what I do, and perhaps Perry might say a little bit. Perry is a lot more eloquent than I am. So I use it primarily with groups, although you can also use poetry in individual therapy. And basically it's about bringing poetry to a group, and then you read the poem and talk about it. You're usually trying to bring a poem in that has something positive at the end. might address some issues that people are grappling with. And then part of your job is to develop some writing prompts that come out of the poem, things that that people might find interesting to write about. And then you spend time actually writing together. And then we share what we read, with the main thing is that there's never any criticism or critique. So it's really about writing from the heart, expressing yourself, and connecting with other people. And actually, Perry and I, one of the things that got me started with my whole poets and conversation is that Perry and I had our own poetic conversation. And that was many years ago. And and that really got me started. We did a workshop, actually, that was just fabulous, a wonderful memory. And it got me started on feeling like my writing was a communication with other poets. So I often use a poem myself to start off how I want to write my poem. I use another poem and jump into my poem almost as a conversation with the poem that I'm using in that way.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Phyllis,
I know that about you.
Phyllis, talk to us a little bit about you really introduced each one of your pieces very nicely and helpfully.
Oh, thank
Go
you.
just a little bit more deeply. Is there one particular poem that you'd like to describe or talk about, just maybe the backstory or how it developed a bit more, just to give us some additional insight into your process of writing?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, let me see.
I know you mentioned the one about Nazi Germany being
Yeah, I was
particularly,
thinking. Yeah, I was thinking about that one.
sure.
So that one, as I remember, that one came to me. It wasn't there wasn't a whole lot of processing there. I think when I started to think about how things were wrong, um, uh, prepare to be wrong. Like you just don't know how you're going to feel about things or what you're going to think about things. You have a certain conceived idea. And I should say that something I didn't mention when I was introducing this poem is that I really didn't want to go to the violence of hope and performance. And I don't know how many people know about it. It's a it's a performance that has traveled all around the world using these instruments that were refurbished out of the concentration camps.
Uh,
And and an Israeli man and his son refurbished them quite beautifully, quite spectacularly. So the reason I went was because my friend Angela, who is here with us, she really convinced me that it would be a good thing for me to do. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I have such a hard time just being reminded of the Holocaust, especially in films, or I've read books, I've watched the films. I lived in Israel for a year, and so I was very much immersed in a lot of Holocaust um, uh, just images and stories.
it was a very brave piece to write, I think.
Well, thank you. Well,
Yeah.
so what I realize is that, and this is about intergenerational trauma, which I think it's something that's on our minds now very, very much as we think about slavery in this country, as we think about um, genocide that's going on all over the world. When we say never again, that's why I say, but that's wrong too. And anti-Semitism is on the rise. So um, But I forgot where I was going. Just the idea that it's really important to understand how these things affect us over the generations, because for me, I just thought, well, that wasn't me. I wasn't there. It doesn't really have anything to do with me.
Mm.
But then I realized that in my family, a big part of the trauma in my family was directly related to the Holocaust, even though no one had actually been in a camp or murdered there, that we knew of. But the general feeling that I grew up in 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 my family was this feeling of dread, and so I realized that it came from there. And so that's a way that, to me, writing about these things is extremely helpful and healing. Um, that realization, particularly on a physical level, meant a lot to me, and has helped me quite a bit. So
Christy is wondering also. Thank you, Phyllis. That was a real helpful and moving response to that question. Christy's wondering, what things do you do to continue developing your craft? What sort of things keeps you working at it and engaged and honing the skills that you have?
Thanks, Christy, for the question. Well, Christy knows about that some because she and I are in a group right now with Danusha Lamoris, who's a wonderful, wonderful teacher. And I've just been taking a lot of classes and doing a lot of workshops lately. And it's been really wonderful. I've been extremely busy, kind of poem crazy. Um, and it's been really terrific. So
It sounds like you've got a very supportive community where you are, and that's always very, very helpful,
yes,
both
indeed.
to challenge you as well as to encourage you, I'm sure.
Yeah. So how about if I ask you a few questions,
Sure.
or are there any questions in the chat for Hiram? I haven't really been able to look.
I think Patty was asking also if, let's see, Patty Ross, who's a wonderful poet in Ellicott City, Maryland. She was asking if I would share my process. I don't really, Patty, thank you for asking. I'm gonna be disappointing to you in that I don't really have a process much. I'm a little bit of a magpie. I pick up things here and there that are shiny to me, and um, try to keep track of them. I have found that if I don't write them down, and I know it's not a sign of anything, of course, but if I don't write them down, I don't remember them. So I try to keep a little notebook handy at all times, and write down a phrase or two, and then from that, try to build out something. And we're living in such an interesting time where, as Phyllis was saying, the headlines are, so loudly amplified and so challenging and so difficult, angering. And so it's there's a lot of poetry, as you can well imagine. You folks are writing some of it in response to that and in reaction to that. One of the things I think that I do is, um, yeah, I definitely try to react some to that, but I also have to find a place of solace and balm, BALM, not BOMB, balm. And for me, writing to the gratitudes, what is it that I'm grateful for, is just incredibly important, near therapeutic at this point for me. So that's not answering your question about, you know, craft or process, Patty, but I don't really have a process other than um, if something catches my eye, ear, or heart or mind, I try to catch it and wrestle it to the page.
Yeah, the first poem you read about being in love with the field, that just warms my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, I know that, Phyllis, a lot of folks always ask, how did you get started as a writer? And from that, looking back at that time, what sort of tips would you give to somebody who's curious about writing but maybe hasn't started the process, or who's hesitant to start the process? What sort of coaching tips would you offer someone?
Yeah. Do you want to maybe answer that first?
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Or if,
All
if
right.
you, yeah, if
No, I
I
don't
hope I
mind
didn't
at
spring
all.
it on you.
No, you didn't. Yeah. There's a couple more questions in the chat too.
Oh, okay.
No,
Sorry.
but so how do you get started writing? I mean, um, we have many writers in here in our group today. So, um, so there could be other people who might want to answer that question
Sure.
as well.
Chime
Yeah.
in. Right.
I want to invite that. For me, it was really just pretty, uh, it just happened. I knew I was unhappy and I just started writing poetry about it. This was when I was a teenager. So, um, and then, yeah, then it sort of drifted away and then I came back to it. Um, and then you're asking about crafting. Was that another part of it?
Well, yeah, that or if you're looking back over your shoulder and seeing a
Mhm.
young person who's kind of interested in writing, what sort
Uh,
of things, how would you encourage them, or what would you discourage them from doing? What would you kind of coach, what kind of coaching tips
uh,
would you give to a young person who's,
well, I think, unfortunately, I think that some of the ways that we teach young people how to be creative, it can actually really rob the creativity right out of them. So you need to be careful, and it's a very hard thing. Sometimes it's kind of insidious. You don't always know, um, how to spot it. But if you're getting more negatives than you are positives, I think you want to try to be careful about that in terms of having other people looking at your work. You want to be encouraged, and you really want to feel like somebody can tell you, 3, 4, or 5 things they really love about your work, in addition to whatever it is that they want to help you to make better. Um, so I don't know if
yeah.
you have more to say about that, Hiram, but
Well, no, I mean, I think I would only add that I know in coming up, it was important to me to have a safe place, a place that I could call my own, that I could make mistakes in, that I could learn from, that I could be joyous in, but a place that only I could dabble and play and work within that on that page. And then if I ever felt like it was something that I wanted to share, there's always that opportunity. But for me, it was the importance of having a place I could go and um,
Mhm.
a sandbox I could play in, so to speak.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see in the comments here, Ginny Connors, who I guess it's okay to say, Ginny is the editor of Grayson Books, and I'm just really so excited and thrilled that you're here. And her comment is read, read, read,
Hmm.
which I couldn't agree with that more. Um,
Someone's also asked about what does it take to put together a collection, a chapbook?
yeah,
What's
really
your
good question.
experience, Phyllis?
Oh my God. Well, what does it take? I guess uh, there's something about putting a book together that I find really interesting and very gratifying, about how to set it up and find the themes and how to put it together. So yeah, I think it's if you have something that you really uh, want to expand on, if you have poems that are of a specific topic, sometimes that's a way to put a book together. But sometimes it can be about different topics that you thread together, based on how you put the book into sections. So I think it's really about writing, 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 reading, 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 and enjoying, really loving and getting something out of what you're doing. And then taking it from there.
A lot of poets will work towards a theme, and will use that theme, of course, as the kind of the organizing principle behind a collection, either a chapbook, which is a shorter collection, or a full length. And as Phyllis said, they'll even put it in almost chapters or thematic subsections, organize the collection that way. Other poets will simply pull together kind of a candy box full of chocolates that, are very varied from piece to piece. And after having maybe published and or written, say 25 to 50 poems, then begin to think about, well, would any of these make sense if they were put between the two covers? And so it is, as Phyllis says, kind of an organic, at least it's been for me, kind of an organic process. But there comes a point in time when I begin to feel like, I need to be looking to see whether or not some of these poems that are orphaned out on individual pages or journals or whatever, if they should be maybe pulled together so that I could at least see them all in the same place at the same time.
Does anyone else, we have many authors here who have books.
Yeah.
Does anybody want to chime in?
Yeah, Sandy,
Sandy,
sure.
yeah, please. I'd love for people to talk with us. Yeah.
I have a brief comment about that. Both of what you both said, Phyllis and Hiram, resonated for me. But I've published a full-length collection and 2 chapbooks and written many more. And it's a different experience for me between the chapbooks and the full-length. The chapbooks actually sort of write themselves. I'll notice that I've written a lot of poems about a theme, and they naturally come together like gathering wildflowers. And then, not that it's easy, it still takes lots of work and revision, and I might add some more. Whereas the full-length collection, I might have a vague theme, but then there'll be sections. So it's a different kind of process.
Some collections will even tell us. Some collections will even tell a story. I mean, they'll be arranged chronologically or from past to present. So yeah, a variety of ways they can be organized.
And I also enjoy, working with other poets in that way as an editor. Although I don't have a formal background in it, I've done that, and I learn a lot about my own writing from working with other poets.
A lot of with the new technologies as well, and with the enthusiasm of younger people coming on more and more, we also need to acknowledge that there are lots of different platforms besides the printed chapbook and the printed collection. There are performance videos, DVDs, YouTubes, and those can be incredibly powerful. And so there are all forms of collections, quote unquote, of poems that can be developed and presented. We have more options now than we used to have.
Exactly. Yeah, who else
poems you read today available in a book yet?
Mary, I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question.
Are the poems you read today available in a book yet or in print?
They are available, I think, except the one about I Speak Twigs. That's a fairly new one. But most of the others, yes, most of the others have been published. And I'll tell you what, I'll put my email in I should have done that early on. I'll put my email in the chat room. I'd love to be in touch with anyone.
Same here, yeah. Yeah, please feel free to be in touch. Any other authors who want to say anything about their books? Or
Brenda Bunting from Maryland, not to put her on the spot or anything, but Brenda has a wonderful collection. Brenda, what did you find in terms of pulling together your collection? What sort of motivated you to do that?
I had the title when I was 25, but I didn't publish until 20 years later. And so it was Poems of Love and Violence in Between Life and Death, thematic, dealing with a series of poems of each subject. So I had love poems, poems dealing with violence, poems dealing with life, and poems dealing with death. And I kind of had the vision for how I wanted each section to look. I had done all of photography, and I knew exactly how I wanted my poem crafted. And so I do think that there's pros and cons between whether you publish it yourself, self-publishing, or publisher. But I wanted total autonomy over this particular project. And I knew exactly how I wanted it to look from cover to cover. So I was very clear about that. Now, as I'm working on my second book of poems, it keeps changing. I keep building a house and having to take it apart again.
Right.
And so I just think that not being very fluid and flexible with the process really gives you actual greater control over it, because you're just going kind of along with the flow. I started off, I think I'm on my third title now. So it kind of goes back and forth,
Sure.
but it I think really as writers, for us, the big important thing is to find it a rewarding process for us personally. Mm-hmm. And when you put that kind of energy into it and out there, then it becomes that for other people. They can kind of feel that. And I did put in there the chat, your writing is an extension of yourself. Don't frustrate yourself. And know as you go, you will grow into a beautifully maturing literary artist. So
there you go. There you go.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
20 years in the making, Brenda. That's very impressive. It's very awesome. Kind of daunting also, but that's amazing. Wow.
Here's a question for you, Hiram, from Chris Leroy. Does using a dialect initiate a poem like Smart Dumb, or does the voice join in, take a phrase, and shape the poem?
Thanks, Chris, for that question. I think for that particular piece, I believe I kind of started to write it without an accent in mind. And as it kind of developed, I began to realize that for me, maybe not for anyone else, but for me, it was speaking up in a little bit of a Southern twang. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to try to read it in that voice. And yeah. So I think it was the writing first, and then maybe the accent came later, Chris.
I'm wondering if this is a time for us to think about turning off the recording so more people can join in to the conversation.
And so we can really say what we think.
Yes. Does that seem like a good idea?
Sure.